It's absolutely amazing nowadays, the stuff that we can do. Stacy and I were watching, we like true crime stuff.
Yeah, David and Christy watched that.
And there's this new show. Well, it's not new. It's been on for 3 years, but American Crime Story. And what it does is each season highlights a crime. Like the first one was the People versus O.J. Simpson. And then the second one was the assassination of Johnny Versace. And then this last one was, I don't know what it's called, but basically it was Bill Clinton, the Clinton scandal. And it toward the end, it was, when the Ken Starr document came out and they posted it online and you could go to a website and look at it. You remember that? I mean, I'm not the only one that remembers that.
Well, I remember it probably happened, but I'm like you. I vaguely remember that.
Well, it was like a 400-page document, and and people were downloading it. And I remember it took forever to download that 400-page document. And a 400-page document is probably 4 megabytes. And it took an hour to download it. And now here we are looking at each other live, no lag, no nothing. Easy as can be. So is everybody going to be at church on Sunday?
Yes.
As far as I know.
That's good, because Mom's going to be there.
Oh, good.
Good.
So, because Diane, I don't think y'all have ever seen each other in person since all this has started. Have you? Because you were not there when she was there.
I've seen her years ago. But
right, but before y'all know each other from this.
Yeah.
Incidentally, Diane, you especially would be interested in this, and now it's finally official and I can make an announcement. Stacy's going to be a literacy coach at Rocky Creek next year.
Well, marvelous.
And since you were like the head of all math coaches,
right,
you kind of get that role.
That's marvelous. Literacy coaches and math coaches do a phenomenal job in the district and support teachers. So
live on YouTube doing his, well, not on YouTube, on Zoom, watching his Bible.
I'll mute her. I don't think she realized that she wasn't muted because she leaned forward.
But yeah, the literacy coaches and math coaches are such a marvelous support for teachers.
Well, she did it when she was in Burlington before we moved to Lexington years and years ago. It was called a literacy facilitator. Right. But I mean, we're talking now she's got 16 more years of experience on top of that.
Right.
So.
And she's taught different grade levels in the last 5 or so years. I forget which other grade level she taught, but it seems like she moved.
Oh, she had taught all of those before, I think. Yeah. Or at least she taught first and fourth. And I think she also picked up second in the meantime. Right.
And I forget which other grade, but I remember vaguely because it has been several years ago since she taught another grade level. But I'm thinking that she actually taught 2 different grade levels in our district.
Yeah, she's taught 3.
Oh, okay. Well,
she's taught first, second, and fourth.
Oh, okay. Well, I remembered one of those changes.
Yeah, since we've been at Pisgah, she went from second to
fourth. Yeah,
I think it was second.
Yeah, I think it was too. I'm pretty sure it wasn't first that I remember her ever teaching.
Yeah, I mean, but I have a hard time keeping up with what grade she's in.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, well, let's get started. Mama, you're muted, by the way. I'm assuming you were talking to somebody in my family.
John,
Yeah. So you leaned forward and I think you tried to mute yourself and you did not. So I took care of it. So,
thank you.
all right. Shall we pray? Father, thank you for this chance to get together to discuss your word. And we ask that you be with us now and be a blessing upon us so that we can be a blessing to others in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So let's get this party started. Slideshow from the beginning. All right. So we are on chapter 25. And we were beginning with verses 1 through 7. And where is all my stuff? Okay. Kings and honors. These are the other proverbs of Solomon that the officials of King Hezekiah of Judah copied. It is the glory of God to conceal things, but the glory of kings to search things out. Like the heavens for height, like the earth for depth, so the mind of kings is unsearchable. Take away the dross from the silver, and the smith has material for a vessel. Take away the wicked from the presence of the king, and his throne will be established in righteousness. Do not put yourselves forward in the king's presence or stand in the place of the great, for it is better to be told, "Come up here," than to be put lower in the presence of a noble. Okay, read through that, and then we will talk about it. All right. So what do you want to talk about with those?
Well, I see where Jesus got the information for his parable.
Yes, that's exactly right. And incidentally, in this chapter, it is not the only time that we're going to hear something very, very familiar that's found in the New Testament. Yes, that is the Jesus tells a parable about a guy who comes in and he says, don't go sit at the place of honor, but because it's better to ask them to come up here, which makes you wonder. And I would have to do more research on this, if in fact the proverbs that were being quoted were well known when Jesus said them, or if he was reminding the people of these proverbs that they should already know. But interestingly enough, it talks about in the first verse about Solomon and Hezekiah. Both kings were considered to be very wise, and following both of their rules, the kingdom did not survive. After Solomon, the kingdom split, and after Hezekiah, it fell. And I don't know. I mean, they were great kings and they did wonderful things. But I wonder if, and which is very strange, because one would think that the writer of Proverbs would have trained up good leaders. Or maybe he trained up leaders that were too good and they couldn't decide who was going to lead. But one thing that good leaders do is they often prepare for their departure. What they leave behind. But very few leaders do that well. I know in hindsight, I look over the course of my ministry, and when I was at my first church, we doubled in size during my tenure there, which 25 to 50 is not a lot, but still we doubled in size. And then when I left, it halved and then some. And that's because I made a mistake. The ministry was dependent on me. And then when I left, they left too. Now, granted, that always happens with every pastor because people get connected. Well, that's the way things are supposed to be, yada, yada, yada. But I think people in churches are supposed to be connected to each other, not to the person up front. And I mean, y'all all know that, well, except Mom, because she always left with the pastor. But, and by the way, so have I. But, y'all have all been through pastoral transitions and you've stayed, but you've also seen people that have left. But I don't know. Not many people left after Dan, did they?
A few.
I mean, there's always going to be a handful, but he left well. Yeah. And of course he had plenty of time I think when you have time to prepare people for the departure, it helps out a lot.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, both of these kings were considered wise. And so it's not surprising then that Hezekiah is the one that used Solomon's words again. Did anybody find it interesting, the first couple verses, that kind of like the part about the glory of the kings and the glory of God? What does the NIV say about that? How is y'all's translation different?
Verse 2 says, it is the glory of God to conceal a matter. To search out a matter is the glory of kings. 3 says, as the heavens are high and the earth is deep, so the hearts of kings are unsearchable.
Yeah. That's basically identical to what the NRSV had. What do you think that means?
That we're not expected to know necessarily what the king knows, that he figures things out and sort of tells us what he thinks we need to know, maybe. And it's
well, and it doesn't just apply to kings, does it?
Well, no, it wouldn't, but they were referencing the king.
Well, here's an example that I've got. So not long after I joined the gym that Stacey and I go to, the favorite trainer was Let Go. And there was a huge uproar because people were very upset that he was let go. And I didn't know hardly any of them very well. I mean, he was a good trainer. Stacy liked him a lot. But you know, I emailed the owners. I was like, hey, as somebody who's had to let people go before, I know it's not easy. And I also know there's usually more to the story than that. Well, and over time, we've gotten to know them pretty well. And there was a lot more to the story than that. But legally, you can't tell it. And so, you know, when people are in charge, they typically know stuff and that not everybody else knows. And they can't always share stuff with everybody either.
Right. Because of procedures or things that everybody doesn't know about. I mean, that happens a lot.
Well, yeah. And for safety and look,
Right.
I firmly believe, and I could be way wrong, that when we were in Iraq, that we found weapons of mass destruction. And that on the boxes, we didn't like the return to sender. It said something like China or Russia or maybe the United States. That's whoever supplied those weapons of mass destruction, it would have been worse for us to say we found them than it would be for us to just say we didn't.
That we didn't. Yeah.
And so Bush was on his second term. He wasn't up for re-election. So it didn't matter if he took the hit for it. And so they said they didn't find him. And I mean, now, like I said, I could be way wrong, but that's just an example that I've got of the person in charge being in the know and knowing stuff that we don't, because sometimes that's necessary.
Need to know.
Well, it's often necessary for now, especially for issues of confidentiality, safety. I mean, it's reasonable.
Rusty Sullivan, when I worked with him, you know, he had been in special ops. He used to say that if the American people knew half of the top secret stuff, that none of us would be able to sleep at night.
Right.
You know, and that's a good thing, I guess, unless we find out the truth later on, because that can be disturbing. But, you know, so, but it is cool that it is the glory of God to conceal these things, but it's the glory of the king to search it out. To uncover that which is concealed. And I kind of like that phrase too. That's not what I want to look at. I probably ought to open the Bible instead. So what does take away the dross from the silver and the smith has material for a vessel? What's that about?
I think dross is the impurities, but I'm not sure.
Yes, it is.
Okay, you take that, and then you take away the wicked from the king, and what you have is you've established the throne in righteousness.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder, it could be twofold. Is it take the wicked away from the king? That is the wickedness that the king possesses. Or is it the wicked people around the king?
Either or.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, so let's move on. Now, this next part goes into my complaining about whoever numbers things. 28, 8 to 10, neighbors and testimony. However, does not start on 8. It actually starts on the second part of 7. What your eyes have seen, do not hastily bring into court. For what will you do in the end when your neighbor puts you to shame? Argue your case with your neighbor directly and do not disclose another secret, or else someone who hears you will bring shame upon you, and your ill repute will have no end. Okay, read through that, and then we'll talk about that. All right. What do you hear in that one?
Think about two things. One is think before you speak, and the other is whatever you say may be held against you.
And also it talks about sharing things that you've seen with your own eyes. Sometimes, I mean, we do see things with our own eyes, but we often interpret what we see based on our own beliefs and our own limited understandings. And so if you start sort of telling other people based on what you've seen, you may not be sharing the truth, but it would be your limited version of it.
Yeah. Well, again, I like true crime stuff and a lot of forensic files things. It's interesting that eyewitness testimony is not always the best testimony.
Yeah. Huh.
Forensic testimony is the best testimony, quite honestly.
Mhm.
And because you can have three people see the same thing and tell different stories of what they saw.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they've done a lot of class studies where somebody comes in and then runs out or does something, and then the class has to describe the person.
Right.
And there's more difference than there is likeness. Okay.
Who's there? My father no longer lives with her.
Don't be so nosy, son.
Would you not be concerned?
No,
Maybe somebody's there to clean the house.
she didn't seem alarmed, so I know.
No, she didn't. I guess I don't have to worry too much.
She was not in a panicked state.
No, she didn't look completely freaked out. So it's either somebody to clean her house or my brother or my aunts. Okay. So anything else in those? I do want to say about your ill repute will have no end. When you break confidence,
Yeah.
people don't like, and that becomes well known. They don't trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And for good reason.
Mhm.
Exactly. All right. The next one is 11 through 15, rulers and words. Oops. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver. Like a gold ring or an ornament of gold is a wise rebuke to a listening ear. Like the cold of snow in the time of harvest are faithful messengers to those who send them. They refresh the spirit of their masters. like clouds and wind without rain, is one who boasts of a gift never given. With patience, a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft tongue can break bones. All right, let's read through that one now. All right. Okay, Mother, we already had this discussion. Who's there?
Well, who was there?
You
I
don't
got a
live-
new couch, and that was the guy that delivered it and had set it up, and I had to go look at it
Oh, okay.
and sign for it.
Okay. I'm like, Dad doesn't live there anymore. Who's at your house?
I told him he was nosy.
Concerned.
He
Margaret.
inherited.
Concerned.
Nosy.
Nobody's as nosy as that woman that you're talking to right now. She was saying that I
Oh,
get it
yeah.
honest.
I can think of one person.
No, you can't.
Mm-mm.
Well, okay, yeah, you can. All right. So,
Moving on.
yeah, moving on. What do y'all hear in that one? Was I the only one, Mommy, you're muted. Was I the only one a little surprised when you hear about snow in the Middle East?
Well, I guess
I
I
don't
know
know,
about
so-
snow, but I mean, if you think about it, it would be very much appreciated, which is basically the thing they're trying to communicate, is how welcome it would be. And if you live in a desert area and you at least know what snow is, it would be something that would be extremely appreciated and welcomed and valued in that situation.
I guess they did not have strawberry farms or peach farms
Yeah.
where snow would not be appreciated at the harvest.
Right.
I thought it was interesting that they would appreciate it at the harvest.
Well, if you ever harvest, I mean, I have not worked out in the tobacco fields pulling the tobacco, but I promise you that people that have been out harvesting in the fields would really appreciate, because it's so hot, that you would really appreciate the snow.
Well, and what they referenced in my commentary is that it was snow blowing down from the mountains. So not like a snowstorm, but like snow blowing down off the mountains. That used to happen and at home some. It was weird.
I had it happen when I was driving to Boone one day, and the sky was clear and snow was just peppering down, and it was blowing down from Boone.
Yeah. I think that's kind of that would make sense too. But yeah, it is about refreshing, about how refreshing it is because when the messenger shows up, what do you expect? Good news or bad news?
Depends on the day.
A cop showed up to our house at 3 o'clock in the morning one day. Rachel was a freshman in college and rang the doorbell, and we're totally freaked out by this. We left our garage door open. He was telling us to close our garage door. I don't know how refreshing that was, but it was better than the alternative of what I expected him to tell us.
Right. Well, and the message I get from this one is that it's the trustworthiness of the messenger, how valued that is to the person who sent him, because the person that sent him appreciates the fact that he's going to communicate clearly and truthfully with whoever he sent them to. But when I was reading it, I also thought how refreshing it would be for the people who are getting whatever the message is, that you can believe the person who's telling you, that you believe it's the truth because they're trustworthy. So to me, it was about having someone who is trustworthy to communicate messages, so you don't get scared or you don't get told something that's not true.
Yes. Yeah. And then you got the, like, clouds and wind without rain is one who boasts of a gift never given. Sometimes you hear about, like, these absentee parents that show up to their kids and tell them what they're going to give them, and then never give them anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they learn not to trust that parent.
Right. Right.
But, living in a desert or a desert area where you see clouds and then the rain doesn't come, how upsetting is that?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like for me in the wintertime when we see clouds and it doesn't snow.
Having your hopes dashed.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
I see that in the summertime too, for my garden and yard, and the clouds up and never rains.
And you see little black clouds in the sky, but nothing falls on you.
Of course, then we have also been to, I think we've also been there. What was it, about 4 or 5 years ago, where it rained every single day of the summer, pretty much?
Oh,
Do y'all remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yes.
I don't
Not for
remember
long,
that.
but it rained every single day.
It rains every day in the summer. I'm happy. I don't.
Well, it
remember
wasn't bad
that.
because it wasn't like we always had bad weather. I mean,
Yeah,
it was, we just had a summer storm every single day.
just a shower.
Yeah.
Well, in Florida, that happens about 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoons if you're near the water, almost every day.
I found that out on my honeymoon.
Well, at least you weren't evacuated.
Nope. And he told me that it happened.
Yeah.
So, all right. So moving on to the next part. Verses 16 to 20, neighbors, good and bad. If you have found honey, eat only enough for you, or else having too much, you will vomit it. Let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house. Otherwise, the neighbor will become weary of you and hate you. Like a war club, a sword or a sharp arrow is one who bears false witness against a neighbor. Like a bad tooth or a lame foot is trust in a faithless person in time of trouble. Like vinegar on a wound is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. Like a moth in clothing or a worm in wood, sorrow gnaws at the human heart. All right, read through those. All right. So what jumps out at you there?
"17 doesn't seem to be promoting love your neighbor as yourself."
I looked at that. And let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house. Otherwise, basically what it's saying is
Don't be a
don't
pet.
always like,
Making a nuisance of yourself.
well,
Right.
what you do is 16 and 17 are connected. It's about too much of a good thing.
Right. Yeah.
Honey's good unless you eat the whole pot and then you puke. Your neighbors, I mean, it's great to hang out with your neighbor unless you're there all the time. You know, you come every time you come home, your neighbor's sitting in your living room.
Well, then they just,
So what
I've
does
had a neighbor
seldom-
like that.
What does seldom mean? Once a year? Once every 2 years?
Well,
Maybe when you're invited.
yeah.
If I need you, I'll call you.
Well, I mean, just not like all the time. Let them have family time. You know, when it's dinner time, leave.
Yeah.
Like, don't sit there and go, what are we having for dinner?
yeah.
And like they look up and they see you coming in, is that you again?
Yeah. So I looked up a foot. No. What is it? The like a bad tooth or a lame foot is trust in a faithless person in time of trouble. You can't count on them.
Right.
Mhm.
Now the NRSV, I don't like. I mean, I guess both of them make sense, but I like the NIV. It's like vinegar on soda,
Right.
not on a wound.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's baking soda,
Yeah.
since they wouldn't have Coke or
Right.
Pepsi.
We're not talking about Coca-Cola.
Yeah. And so the one is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. In other words, read the room.
Yeah.
You know, timing is everything.
Yeah.
Like a moth in clothing or a worm in wood, sorrow gnaws at the human heart. I don't think that needs any further explanation. I think that's
A perfect visual.
I think so. All right, let's move on to the next part. 21 to 26, waters and words. If your enemies are hungry, give them bread to eat. If they are thirsty, give them water to drink. For you will heap coals of fire on their heads, and the Lord will reward you. The north wind produces rain, and a backbiting tongue, angry looks. It is better to live in a corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a contentious wife.
We've heard that one before.
Yes, we have. Like cold water to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country. Like a muddied spring or a polluted fountain are the righteous who give way before the wicked. All right, let's read through those and then we will chat about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what'd you hear in that?
Now, I'm going to confess 21 and 22 have always bothered me and always been sort of a quandary to me because they seem to be in a totally different spirit. Is that when I read the first, I mean, I've always thought that you're supposed to do good to other people, whether they're your best friend or whether they're not your best friend. You should have a good spirit with them. But if you're only being good to them because you're trying to heap coals on their head, that really doesn't seem like it's in the right spirit to me. And so I've always had mixed feelings about those two actually going together.
Well, I understand. I'll give you the example that I always give, even though she's sitting here in the room. My mother is an excellent pastor's wife. And as you're aware with pastors, sometimes people can be, mean to them and to their families and things like that. I'm very fortunate where I am. Mom would typically seek these people out and be exceptionally nice to them. When somebody was really giving it to my dad and pretend like nothing was going on, basically to sort of say, so make them kind of stop and think, maybe I'm not even bothering him. You know, he hadn't even told his wife that he's upset.
Yeah.
And also make them stop and question their own actions.
Yeah. And see, that to me is in the right spirit because you're trying to set a good example and, and, you know, help them to maybe see the error of their ways. To me, that's in the right spirit. But if you're doing something just so you can make them feel bad, which is what the second verse has always sort of said to me, you know, they just seem to conflict with each other and always.
Well, what it also says is if burning coals in terms of eternal punishment.
Possibly so.
It means that you're in the right.
Yeah.
You're doing what's right so long as you're taking care of your neighbor.
Right.
And if you're loving your neighbor. And if they still want to be an enemy, well, that just lumps burning coals on their head.
Yeah, and that's on them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's it. That's on them.
And sometimes when you're nice to people, you don't mean to be heaping burning coals on them, but they feel like you are.
Yes.
In other words, they misinterpret how you're treating them as
Right.
you're.
Well, they're so blinded by, but you're still called to do what you do.
Right.
Yep.
You're still called to love your enemies.
Yes.
Whether they like it or not. That's on them.
Mm-hmm.
Is basically literally on their head.
Yeah.
By the way, that's in Romans. St. Paul writes about it in Romans.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Anything else in that?
I wondered about 25. Like cold water to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country.
Good, refreshing, needed, helpful,
Okay.
all the above. It's a good thing. I guess the word cold sometimes throws us off because we don't think, but cold water, you want cold water, especially when you're thirsty.
I guess I question why they're waiting for good news from a far country. I guess because of our modern communication where we can hear anything we want to hear quickly, that's a foreign concept to me.
Yeah, well, and how often are we hearing, I mean, even with our current setup, how often are we hearing things, how often are we getting reports from foreign countries? I mean, our leaders do, but
my version says a distant land, so that could be next state over.
could be.
Or it could be Alaska.
Yeah,
Could be that too.
I'll ask if I see her.
Mm.
All right, well, let's finish up. 27 and 28. Honey and honor. It is not good to eat much honey or to seek honor on top of honor. Like a city breached without walls, it is one who lacks self-control. Okay, read through those and then we'll finish it up. All right. So what's there?
You need to have self-control.
Yep. Or to seek honor on top of honor. What is that?
Well, my version reads, nor is it honorable to seek one's own honor. And
Yeah.
that reminded me of an individual that worked with soil conservation when I started. And a lot of people didn't really care for him, but when a big award would come up, he would write himself up for it.
Do you ever get it?
I'm not sure whether he did or not, but the fellow that worked under him told his boss man, said, well, I can't stay here with this fella any longer. So he wound up with me in Walterboro. That's how I found out about what his supervisor then had done. And he said, that's
Wow.
just not right.
Well, and the last verse, the 28, again, the practicing self-control. If you not, you are totally vulnerable. You've really lost all your protection so you're totally vulnerable to anything.
Yeah. Exactly. Anything else? Well, all righty. I will see you all soon. Y'all have a great day.
I'll have a good